What's it been, like 30 days, maybe more, since the Prime Minister was hanging around at the House of Commons? Well, today, the House sits again, and guess who was missing? That's right. Our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, was not there. Pierre Poilievre also missing, I guess, still basking in the glory of his Joe Rogan experience. However, I'll tell you what did arrive today to the House, and that was a report of the Auditor General. 3 new findings we're going to talk about today. I don't understand why our leadership is not in the House of Commons today.
Well,
however,
yeah, no, I know, Mike. You know, and the Auditor General, Mrs. Hogan, came out today, and she actually put a report out that really targeted the pay system for the federal government, the RCMP, and of course, immigration. So it's an interesting way to start. You know, the reseating of the House of Commons and the return of the leadership. We really just jumped right into a scandalous report that I'm sure is going to take most of the week and monopolize the floor and questions. And in a time, Mike, if we can put it in perspective, the world is in disarray. We were how many hours this morning when I woke up? I thought for sure that Trump would announce that, you know, he was going to pull off and not start to bomb the water and power plants in Iran, but he hadn't. Not until I got here did the announcement come out that, quite frankly, we had 5 more days. He was giving them 5 more days.
Yep.
He said talks were going well, and they had started communication. The Iranians, quite frankly, have reported they haven't had any talks.
This out of Tehran.
So
Tehran, we have had no discussions with the U.S., so it's hard to know what the truth is.
Well, it's pretty hard to see if there's leadership, quite frankly, because we haven't seen anyone surface on the other side. So,
exactly.
You know, it's kind of like negotiating with the Phantom.
And I think also some of this negotiation, of course, is going to go through Turkey, through different Middle Eastern states. And it's probably a little bit of broken telephone right now if there's any communication at all. Nonetheless, there was Trump saying, okay, I'm going to give him 5 more days. That was worth us talking about here in Canada today.
Well, yeah. So, you know, when I started this morning, you know, I said to my wife in the morning, I said, wow, this could be quite a historic day. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, if he goes through with what he's planning and he does shut down the power plants, which then shuts off all the water and water treatment plants. That's going to have significant impacts on that country, which quite frankly is going to spiral a whole other set of events, I'm sure, on their part, which probably shuts down the Middle East, which then, you know, it has ramifications for the U.S. for sure, because the AI centers and the funding of, you know, the different states of all the American high-tech AI centers and everything else going on. So that would take the NASDAQ and throw it just into the toilet, which then would spiral the stock exchange crumbling down. And you saw it actually this morning. So everything was kind of dropping down. We saw a decrease, you know, it opened very quietly.
The European markets were free-falling, actually.
The Asian markets were free-falling. And then all of a sudden, announcement came, 5 days, boom. The Dow, I just looked at the Dow before we got on the show, up 1,000 points, right?
That's insane.
Like literally,
wow.
That's the twist that these announcements are making. You know, oil down $20 a barrel. It's just like a yo-yo. It's just up and down, up and down. And in the midst of this potentially cataclysmic event, we decide to focus on the Auditor General report of Canada.
I mean, it's a doozy for sure.
Oh, it is.
But it definitely is a great distraction for the House and for our leadership to not have to show up and say, okay, there are problems. We do understand. Here's our play on it. Here's how we're going to handle the economy while we're doing it. Here's how we're going to handle commodities and oil prices. We all needed that today desperately, I think.
Oh, yeah, I did. I got up, you know, and like I said, I was having the conversation at breakfast. Go, wow, this could be a pretty interesting day by the end of it. It'd be nice to see that the government's in the House again. It'd be great for them to talk about a contingency plan, some things that we're going to do if certain things happen. It'd be nice to know there's a plan. But instead of not, you know, we didn't get that plan. what we did get, well, let's go through what we got from it,
Yep.
because it's very interesting. So the first thing we got was the report on the modernizing of the pay system, the Phoenix to Dayforce.
Right.
Yeah, which is very interesting. And it really told us that this is a $1 billion system. Well, it's a multi-billion dollar system.
What are they? $4.2 billion in on it.
Yeah, for a pay system.
Wow.
So, and the ongoing customization costs are turning out to be, this has been going on for a decade, $4 million a year.
Wow.
So they bought the system and they're paying an additional $4 million a year just to keep customizing it. Right now they have.
Why do they need to keep customizing it? Is a question I've got to ask.
I don't know.
What do you do? What is changing so dramatically that we need to customize a payment system
to not even a Canadian company? It turned out to be an international company. It was a Middle Eastern company, was it not?
It is owned primarily by the Abu Dhabi investment group.
So, So, and right now we have 233,000 pay transactions still backlogged with errors. And there's 103,000 employees affected by these errors, which still haven't been resolved. So this system, it doesn't look like it's getting better. It transacts, it's about 38 billion annually. So it does a lot of payroll. So it's a big system. I get it, but this seems to be kind of crazy. But again, we have an unmanageable government contract that just keeps riding along year after year.
This is one of the things I noticed in the report. There's no clear measurement of future cost savings. In other words, why did we do this in the first place?
It was an archaic pay system. We switched.
Okay, but there's no real measure on us getting a cost savings over time with this. That's never been addressed. And these ongoing customization costs of $4 million a year. How much customization could we possibly be doing? Okay, so here's the thing. If they don't fix this, the loss of revenues to the government are significant. The errors that are occurring with employees is causing backlash.
Yep.
We're kind of stuck in this position, which I think is what the Auditor General is really indicating to us. This one is we're soaking in this one, and there's no way for us to climb out of it. We just have to keep moving through it.
Yeah, you got to love her because she has such a nice, easygoing temperament. Yeah, you do believe her. She's very honest and straightforward. And you listen to her, she just lays it out. She doesn't, she doesn't seem to have a stake in any game. Just, here's what we found and here's where we are. So the next one, this one is very interesting because the RCMP has been all over the news, mostly since late last week, about India's interference in Canada.
Oh, there wasn't any, Paul.
There wasn't any. And quite frankly, I know there's a lot of mainstream media keep kind of spiraling around this one. And we heard about it on, I think, Sunday when the head of the RCMP was actually interviewed, and they said to him, well, what about the shortfall that's coming out in the Auditor General report? And he kind of talked around it and didn't say much about it. Well, it came out today, and they're over 3,400 officers short now. So they tried to hire up something like 12,000 officers, and they're 3,400 short. I don't know. It's taking 330 days to recruit each person. And the cost to recruit them is $247,000 a person.
By the time a recruit is ready to hit the streets or take a department there, just to recruit them was $274,000 and get them through training.
Yeah.
That's a remarkable number. And we need 3,400 of them. And what we discovered is none have been processed against that 3,400. So we haven't even met that mark yet. And now we've got to hire 3,400 more at 330 days and almost $300,000 per.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of, and unfortunately big gaps across Canada right now where people are needed. And we've identified, this has been identified since 2023.
Yeah, this is
an ongoing problem coming out of COVID. was identified. There's been multiple plans put in place to actually rectify this.
They had a pretty massive attrition group at the same time, so they had to replace a lot of officers.
An aging group, retirements, everything else. It still hasn't been corrected.
No.
So, and then finally, probably the biggest one on this list for the day, which I think just got a lot of eyebrows, international student program reforms. And so when they dug into it, they found 153,000 students were flagged. So basically, the schools came forward and said, we found issues with 153,000 students that applied to be in our school.
They weren't qualified or...
They came here, they got a study permit or a study permit. They don't look like they're legitimate.
They're not attending.
They're not attending. Their background, what they said they knew, they don't know. They have no previous education, whatever the reason. They were only able to investigate 4,000. So really, and then quite frankly, out of the 549,000 students that came in 23-24, 90+% were approved for work permits after. So after their study permits terminated, no one left. Almost 100% of them have stayed in the country. And the crazy one that I thought, there were a few that quite frankly were flagged to fraudulent misrepresentation. Something like 800 of them.
Yeah.
Half of those were given a permanent residency.
Anyway.
So even though they were on the list to be investigated,
they came through fraudulent means.
They were identified, they were linked, and still they made it through to PR. So that was the kind of the craziest one of the day. For me,
I got to tell you, Karen Hogan is, I said this to you before, she's kind of my hero. And like you say, she just delivers it in such a, well, it's a fact, it's a fact, it's a fact. Here's what we found. There doesn't feel like a lot of cover up. That leaves me to think, okay, why put her in today? Well, it's a big distraction. It puts everybody up on their heels like they're actually doing something.
Yeah.
When reality is it's a report that not much will be done about the report itself. Hopefully changes will be made department by department.
3 ministers, quite frankly, get put up today. Lena Diab, Gary from immigration. I can't think of the other gentleman on the contract, but they get put up in front of the media today. They're probably going to get shuffled anyways for the most part.
I agree with that. I think that they're sacrificial lambs.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. They're about to get new portfolios. Our Minister of Safety, I don't think is going to stay in that post much longer, especially after this RCMP report comes out. And so, it's an easy way to fill a day with the report from the principal coming in. And that's what it felt like. Everybody's back to school. We're going to start the day off with some bad news. But our star students don't have to be here.
Exactly, Mike. And, it's interesting because the government and I think the Prime Minister have really struggled with this Iranian issue, with the war. And they continue to struggle with it. Last night when they heard that the Trump had given them 48 hours to respond to the power plant shutoffs and the water treatment centers, they probably thought, oh boy, I don't really want to be on the front line today.
Right.
This is one I've kind of messed up. I need a little bit of time. So probably if I'm doing the agenda, I put it forefront. I put my stuff in the back, and I probably sit and wait for the day. Now it's interesting. So that didn't happen. He's given them 5 more days.
Yeah, I think that this was a time killer for 24 hours, but now we've got 5 days to kill.
So what's your next move? So at some point you have to come back. At some point you have to answer some questions. And I think what, and I continue to say it on most shows we do, what we're looking for now is a plan.
Yeah.
So take us through the contingency plan. What are we going to do? Gas, we sit there every day and we say, well, gas is going up. This is appearing to be a very long, drawn out war.
Could well be.
This isn't something I think that's going to go on, for, as Trump said, 1 month. This is something that's going to go on for months. And I mentioned it again to you recently. In 1973, the embargo went on for 6 months. It decimated the economy. Yeah. So it looks like the outcome of where we're going is pretty close. So this looks like something that's going to be months, not
even
weeks.
more, I think even more impactful based on population size, what's required from us in the way of fossil fuels now.
Yep.
Yeah, we're in trouble. And then to top it off, it does not line up nicely against our liberal government, who has so adamantly kept us out of the carbon game, when right now, I mean, being
We're middled.
we
middled,
just
Mike.
got middled.
We did get middled. We got middled. We didn't get into EV, and we didn't go further into gas.
And be honest with you, we didn't achieve net zero anyway.
No. Well, we've made some headway, quite frankly. You know,
We have,
Yeah.
but net zero means
the rest of the world.
the rest of the world
has
has
and they're
to keep
never
up.
going to. Right?
No, and so we've put us. You're right. We got middled.
Yeah.
We don't have any place to sell our product at the moment. We can't even sell it to ourselves. And this, I think, is a hard day to be the prime minister. When you stand in front of your country and say, oil prices through the roof, the economy in the dumpster, and our biggest trading partner hates us with tariffs and is in the midst of a war. So that's a terrifying moment to be the prime minister, when everybody says, well, we have all the natural resources. We have all the fuel that we need, all the oil that we need. We could be trading on the open market with it.
But remember, in 1973, similar situation. But what did we do when we came through the embargoes and we made it through? We sat down and we nationalized our gas, right?
Yeah, and so
Petro-Canada. We created Petro-Canada to deal with something. And it took us almost 10 years to kind of get it up and running, until 1980, a little less than 10 years. We got it up and running. We actually bought a few companies. We bought gas stations. We figured our own, downstream, upstream processing capabilities. We got that online. And
thank God we still got that, huh, Paul?
yeah, no, we don't have it anymore. We sold it off. But,
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
Like,
but these are, whether we're talking about oil, gas prices, whether we're talking about military and defense, like, this is where the plan has to come now. The rubber has to hit the road.
Yeah.
Because we are dancing on the head of a pin. You look at the indicators from today. Right away, this morning, it looks like the markets are going to crash out.
yeah. If this morning was any, I think that's why Trump stood up and said, okay, gave this line that we're in negotiation, even though Iran is like, we are? I don't know. He had a desperate moment this morning.
Well, I think in my, Paul's opinion on this one, I think, what happened to him is he likes to play these games. So he, over the weekend, 48 hours, he has 48 hours. So with satellites and everyone watching the military right now, I think he got to the morning and he realized he's got to go into action. So it's a big military machine. The U.S. Navy and everyone right now, it's a big clunky machine. So it's not easy. And that's one of their challenges. They're not nimble. So when they go into action, they have to prep. And so you see them prepping. So he would have had to give the order to go and he'd start getting ready. So that would have to start to go into motion. And I think he's sitting there and he's thinking, I don't know if I can do that. I was hoping they would come to the table. So then, of course, he delays, waiting to see what happened. Now, quite frankly, you play that bluff, doesn't work out. So now you're sitting there. And so now it's really, what do I do next? Well, I might have to go to ground at some point. So now,
which is a tough pill for Americans to swallow. They don't want more. They don't want a repeat of what happened in Iraq. They don't want a repeat of what happened in Afghanistan. They don't want that.
They don't have a big enough military right now. They don't have enough people.
I think that this is an understated thing.
Yeah.
The U.S. does not have enough people to fight in Iran. They have 100 million people almost. So that's a large country to invade.
Oh, it is. Well, and all told, with reserves and consultants, everything, the U.S. military is 1 million people, maybe a little more now.
That's not, and troops on the ground ready to go.
But that covers that. You remember that covers the whole world. So
true.
All the bases they have. So as they pull people towards this war, this conflict, they need to backfill. So at some point, and they're not having, recruitment is so. There's a lot of people who aren't, really into this war. The U.S. is not
Look, I'm happy to say it. If this goes on, if this becomes a protracted war, Trump has to go back to Congress and ask them to get people 18 to 25 registering for the draft.
Right now, he needs to get $200 billion more because the cost.
Cash.
Yeah, he needs cash because
I don't think Congress wants to give him that.
But what are you going to do? You can't stop and pull out, because if you stop and pull out, basically Iran takes the region. And if Iran takes the region, then quite frankly,
you've taken massive steps backwards.
Massive steps. Then at that point, you have to kind of minimize yourself, come back and protect, your own soil.
After $1 trillion worth of military ordnance into your battle.
Right. So you almost have to keep going forward. If the Iranians don't want to talk to him and don't want to negotiate with him, then he's got to still move forward. So the delay of today is only the delay.
I believe you're right, yeah.
We can sit and watch out, but and see what happens, but we need a plan.
What do you think Carney does with the rest of the week?
I think he's at some point runs out of, issues. Listen, anyone who lives here knows we had immigration challenges, we had unfortunate bad student immigration, policies. It didn't help the students that came. It didn't help Canada. It hasn't helped. So we know that. The RCMP, I think we haven't heard much about, quite frankly. So this is no big surprise. Most people have kind of, they see the RCMP and the musical ride and a few other times.
I also don't think this is the scandal that will be interesting with the RCMP. The more that you hear about the RCMP, the less it sounds like it's being operated with any sort of, quality at this moment. Certainly over the years, it's diminished. There's a lot of focus on what's going on in that force. There's a huge shortage of it. But I think that might be for another day and a different topic, not necessarily how they're recruiting, although it is a very serious thing. I think that there's other issues there that the Auditor General will eventually get to.
Yeah. Well, and, I hope they resurrected, to tell you the truth. It was a program we were all proud of as Canadians for many, many years, quite frankly. And we talked about it. They did amazing things. So, I think, unfortunately, it's times like these where issues such as the RCMP do need to get rectified, because if we get pulled into some conflict or war in some shape or form, that causes us to restructure who we are as Canadians and as Canada. So that will probably
federal officers make good sense at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there is, issues to be dealt with at that time. But the big issue is, you might get these issues may be talked about for the next day or two. Yeah. You still have a few more days in the week, right?
That's what I'm thinking.
And so at some point, someone's going to stand up and say, what's our plan?
Let's face the music on this one and tell us what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Our military is not ready to provide necessarily in that action. We can't provide oil to the world. Was it Christoph earlier who said we could take them water? Somebody mentioned we've got water.
Yeah.
But, really we have nothing to offer in that scenario at the moment. So maybe that's a good reason to be quiet. But we also are going to take on humanitarian support. We always do. We're going to take on more immigration. We always do. When these people are displaced from Iran, they will show up on our doorstep. We will likely welcome them with open arms, more asylum, more cost. Really, we need to have a discussion. I think you're right. We need our prime minister to say to us, all right, I understand the situation. Here's where we're at the moment. Here's what we're going to do with our military. Here's how we're going to shore things up at home. And here's how we're keeping our economy somewhat balanced.
Well, that's the big thing, right? What are we going to do, if the economy spins out of control, if the U.S. is sort of decimated by all these events, where do we stand, and how do we not keep out of it? We'll be dragged into it from an economic downturn, but how do we survive? What industries do we focus on? What industries do we still produce? How do we band together to keep our fuel prices?
We're could be fine, but we need direction.
Yeah, well, in times of war and in times of challenges, the government needs to figure out which industries to key on. That's really what
That makes perfect sense.
Now, we haven't lived in our lifetime. This is an interesting time because this is something we haven't lived through. And most of us, quite frankly, wouldn't even know how to do it. This is wartime preparation right now. It's a contingency plan for wartime. It really is. And depression and hard times. That's the plan we need to start talking about, and the what if scenarios if that does happen.
Do you know why it feels, I think, a little closer to us at the moment is because our relationship is strained with the U.S. And historically, we just rely on the U.S. to fight their battles and, I guess, let us know what they need. Having said that, this time we have a strained relationship. If we can't provide what they need in a time of war, where does that leave us with Trump, with the U.S. government?
I don't even want to think, Mike. It's
a hard one.
It's
right?
a hard one, yeah.
But that's the moment we're at right now.
Well, it is, and that's the supply chains, and it goes to everything. It goes to from food, food to medical supplies. Everything that we rely on. Think about your daily life, and go through and figure out where it comes from and where you get it. All those supply chains will be broken in some shape or form.
Oh, if Trump says to Canada, you have to stay. If it extends itself to the point where China involves themselves, which is, in my opinion, unlikely, they're very autonomous and they like to do their own thing. But if, because of strained relationships between China and South Korea, become inflamed, this could become part of the. If we're told then by Trump, okay, no more supply chain interaction with China, we're doomed.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Well, and again, go take a look at your store shelves. Go take a look. So all the things that you think that you're going to potentially be impacted by that come from abroad that we import in, you have to assume that they're going to be impacted. Yeah. Whether timing or just eliminated. So therefore, we would have to go replace all those things. And then it comes down, our exporting basically disappears. Yeah. So, car companies switch to doing armored vehicles. Plane building companies build, warplanes and, shipbuilding warships. All those transition over. So you're not doing, leisure vehicles, leisure boats, leisure planes. You're shifting off into start to produce different things. So all our sectors, it's interesting. On the weekend, we made an announcement, I think, and no one really said much. It was very quiet. And I know we're going to talk about it this week. We put $200 million in quietly over the weekend. We made a very quiet announcement about it into a space advancement, space technology. Yeah. With Nord Space and on the Atlantic Canada, and we made the move towards that. Not really saying why. So we just kind of said we're going to put some satellites for defensive and research purposes into the air, and that's what we're doing.
They're building a competing launch. Okay, maybe I'm no scientist. I think you know this, but they're putting a $100 million launch pad in Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Most of the launch pads you see around the world try to stay near the equator. I don't know what this would do that's different. Yeah. But $100 million. And really, what does that do? It puts us in a position to launch not our technology, but likely the technology of other countries. And in fact, this program is a partnership with the government of Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that very interesting. Very quiet announcement. Yeah. We're moving towards it. But, again, if that's a strategic move, tell us. We're doing it for potential, for security. We're putting some satellites
Once again, Carney, not the best at explaining to us what he's doing.
I know, but we're running out of, I guess, hopefully we're not running out of time. I guess patience. At some point, the public's going to be saying, okay, I need a plan here. Right? The public's starting to, and you hear the rumblings, like people are like, okay, what's the plan? Come on. We got to,
this weekend when gas went over 170, 171, 172, everybody was thinking, do we have a plan?
Yeah. Well, it's going to endemic tag now is saying $2. Remember we said that at the beginning. So it's going up to $2. It's starting, everyone, they're doing the interviews in the morning, when you're getting up in the morning. Yeah. How do you feel about, I just put $40 more in my tank this week, so now everyone's, another $100 out. Right. They know it's going. And they're starting to ask the question, what is the long-term plan and how do we get it? Aren't we an oil exporter. Yeah, we are.
Exporter, but we also buy it.
We also, we export it at a discount. We buy it back at a premium.
Yeah.
So, it's not of any benefit to us. The measurement or pricing of gas is based on a North American benchmark. So that really doesn't have anything to do with us. It leaves here and comes back at the world global impacted price.
That blows my mind in itself that everything seems measured up against OPEC. Meanwhile, we're measured against the production of Texas tea.
Yeah. And we take a significant discount because of our heavy crude.
Right.
Yeah. So that doesn't even help us, quite frankly, coming back. But, it's the interesting part is we thought, and we were really brazen about it. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint. We're going to electric. Mm-hmm. We're going to spend billions of dollars getting plants up and running. We never did.
No, we just
did. We got halfway there. We told our auto industry, you guys going to convert. We're all going to be driving electric cars by 2030. Now, in comes Trump, and he says, I want my auto plants back. You can do whatever you want with your electric cars. And quite frankly, we stopped our R&D on gas because, a lot of American companies left and sold their interest in it, smaller Canadian companies. And quite frankly, our Canadian companies are just making money until EV was coming. So they were just legging it out. It's good income for 10 years, assuming that it would be delayed.
A lot of those guys standing around saying, we're never getting there. We're just going to hang here. We're never getting there anyway. So just our day will come back.
But quite frankly, you're not putting any R&D. You're not doing pipelines. No. You're trying to make, and they've done a good job, sort of reducing their carbon footprint through emissions. They've figured out ways to actually reduce emissions on their pipelines and through pipelines, and pushing it in and storing it in the ground. They've done significant, technological advancements on that. It's front.
True, Paul. I don't very often, certainly on these shows, I don't very often talk about that. But one thing net zero did do is it made us leaders in doing this extraction.
Oh yeah, carbon supply.
And
carbon supply. We did a carbon storage supply. We did an amazing job at it. We don't talk about it a lot, quite frankly, and most of the rest of the world doesn't do it. We did it. So we spent billions of dollars to create these storage supply mechanisms to actually push it into the earth, liquefy it and store it have it absorbed into the rock.
It's okay, so I have a question for you. At this point, we see the Prime Minister day one, day two. Maybe tomorrow we see him. Maybe Poilievre's back in there. Do they start arguing about Canadian issues? I mean, I'll take the bet on this one.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's all Canadian issues. I don't think that we even mention for the first couple of days that there's even anything going on in Iran. And it's disturbing to me to no end. Well, we have no involvement. We have no opinion, anything.
A day or so on these issues that came up today, quite frankly.
That's fair. They're going to have to respond.
Then we get to affordability.
Yeah.
It's not until, the sad part is, it won't be until, and hopefully there is a peace agreement or something comes in between, and maybe one of these Trump, bluffs where he bluffs 48 hours and maybe they work at some point. Maybe he pulls a rabbit out of a hat. Cooler heads prevail.
Hopefully.
But Mike, if you think about the circumstance and just looking at it from a religious perspective, and looking at it from the fact that they did eliminate most of the leadership and their families, there's got to be a high degree of animosity out there right now.
Anybody left in support of that government is
pretty pissed
heavily incentivized right now to react in that war.
And quite frankly, they've managed. They got through the initial shock, the initial wave of bombs and everything, and now they're kind of getting comfortable, and they're like, "Oh, that wasn't so bad."
Yeah, and Iran just launched a massive Reach missile. I think it has a capacity of 8,000 kilometers.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't know about you, but I woke up over on Sunday turned on the TV, was moving around doing my chores, and all of a sudden I start seeing these concentric rings show up on the TV.
Yes.
So and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? And I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, this is the reach of these long range missiles that are now able to hit France, able to hit the UK. They're all, and I'm like, okay, that was never talked about. So now that's on the table. So now all these things are kind of coming into play. And how much of that is real and how much is, just trying to get them to join the fray? I don't know. But quite frankly, it does scare me when I look at it, because now that changes the whole dynamics of the war and who
certainly
comes to
woke
play.
Europe up this morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it did. And now, quite frankly, I'm sure they were sitting on pins and needles, this 48 hours thing. And I'm sure they were making calls.
Yeah. Don't you push.
Yeah.
I can see it now. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You go at 11 o'clock, and they let one of those missiles go and it hits us and we can't knock it down.
You and I are at war.
Well,
yeah,
we have a problem.
We've got a problem.
Yeah, we got a problem. So, that was caught. There were a bit that all of a sudden NATO and everyone's talking, and that was causing some anxiety.
That's why I do believe that Iran has not had any sort of talks with the U.S., because they do have sort of the upper hand at the moment, saying, hey, we can land one of these anywhere you want in Europe. Any of your allies in Europe can take one of these in the mouth right now. That probably changed his attitude.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think but now the thing is, where do you go next?
I don't see what the next move is. That's what concerns me the most.
But you can't sit still.
You got to put boots on the ground, maybe?
You can't sit still.
No, I don't understand what... I think it was ill-advised to do this, I have to say. I think maybe Trump only read part of the email that was sent to him before this went on. I don't understand. But for certain, Iran has more in the cannon than anybody, well, I think certainly than the U.S. military thought, or Trump, because they just poise every day. They poise every day to get back to it.
He doesn't back out, which I don't think he can. He's got to go forward, which I then will impact us. And I think that's the thing we need to start thinking about.
Yeah.
It really comes. Forget, the contingency. We need plan A, B, and C of what we do when certain things happen. From there, we can actually, and I'm not saying we need all the gory details. We just need what happens to our food supplies, what happens to our gas. We need to start having those conversations. And what are our backup strategies? What do we do? I was looking today, and it's funny, after the announcement, the Auditor General stepped down, the Bloc de Québécois stepped up, right? And it's very interesting. The first thing they talked about was separation again. Well, can I tell you something? We have Alberta and Quebec now, not very happy.
Yeah.
Let's be serious. Alberta, of course, oil. So they're gaining some strength now in that discussion.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And
Quebec hydro.
I was going to say, we have the other major energy source comes right out of Quebec.
And quite frankly, if all the infrastructure in the Middle East goes down, a lot of support and a lot of money that was going towards all the AI centers in America are impacted. They're going to be looking for sources of power, right? Now, we do have a card there. Again, our nuclear power is very advanced. We've done a good job. We have a high content of uranium, and quantity. So we do have some cards we can play. But again, those are the strategic things we should be talking about now and talking to it about Canadians. These are industries that we're going to shift, a third of our population into this and, a tenth of our population. These are industries that we have to do. And with that, we can actually, supply the following to the Western Hemisphere. And how are we going to do that? And how are we going to work within that?
Well, you're right. We need to find our play in there.
Yes.
I mean, if the Western Hemisphere is what the final frontier is for us, well, for the time being, if that's what this all becomes, we need to find our place in that hemisphere now.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a place. We produce next to nothing. We have very little military to offer, very little in the way of, we have great natural resources, but all we do is sign off giving those away.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And quite frankly, that's our productivity conundrum, which we talked about time and time again in different shows. But in times like this, we have to specialize in different industries that will help us survive and advance as a country. And maybe, out of all this uncertainty and economic strife and challenges, maybe we will come through this stronger, because it will have made us focus on industries that we should have been specializing in and we should have been focused on. And maybe we, just took it for granted.
I hope you're right. I hope this does create the refocus. You see it in a few places right now, certainly over energy, at a time where we kind of need to focus really hard on what we do as a nation. Mm-hmm. I hope that we take advantage of this moment to do that. I don't know, but like you said, we're kind of middled at the moment, so we're beholden to what happens in the U.S. We'll see. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Patriotic means looking out for each other and fixing things together.
True patriotism is being in the country you love, surrounded by people you love, and great weather.
Being a patriot is being a part of your community and caring for it.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, patriotism is the one thing we all share.
It's okay to be critical of government and still be a patriot.
It's gratitude to your country.
Of course I'm a patriot. I'm Canadian. It's my home.
Well, actually, true patriot love is the mission.